Welcome again to the Gen Z Show. You're joined today with both of the McLambs, Sarah Beth and James. That's me. That's her, Sarah Beth. How are you doing, Sarah?
I'm good. How are you?
Did I take you off guard with a new intro?
Yeah, a
I
little
tried to
bit.
shake it up some. So, Sarah Beth, let me ask you a question. What do you think the term blended family means?
Well, I guess something that's not traditional. I've never really heard of that term before, but my guess is something, not traditional, not like, you know, mom, dad, two kids from those parents. So maybe like divorced families coming together or something along those lines is what comes to mind.
Well, the term blended family is very similar to what you're talking about. Our guest today is Craig Morgan, who is the founder of Blended Together Forever, a nonprofit ministry out of Texas that focuses on providing resources and education for blended families. And he defines blended families as just what you said, anything that is not in the nuclear family sense of the mom and dad and the children that are offspring of that mom and dad. So that would include, as you said, divorce coming in, maybe a child coming from another family living with them, like a relative coming in living with them. Could be a widow situation, could be an adoption situation. There is all kinds of different ways. It could be, children living with a grandparent instead of living with their mom and dad, or with an aunt instead of living with their mom and dad. Any of those aspects is a blended family. And Greg identifies that they're almost up to 2/3, 65% of all families in the United States are blended in some way or another. So that's just an astounding um, statistic. It's just extremely high, and I believe that probably is relates to where they come from. But we really have a great discussion today on what the challenges of blended families, what the children that are in blended families, the challenges they face, and he really describes, gives us some practical tips on how to parent them, how to work with them, and how youth that are in those families can be their best success. So I wish I'd have known this early on, especially as a teacher. You're going into this. How do you think that would help you as a teacher going forward to have this kind of information?
Oh, I mean, understanding students' background is huge, and developing rapport with them. You can't really get through to kids unless they know that you care. And so, by having these resources, I mean, that helps me care more because I understand a little bit better what they're going through and how to help them.
Well, let's go to our interview with Blended Families Together at blendedtogether.org, Mr. Craig Morgan. Craig, welcome to the Gen Z Show. Thank you so much for agreeing to be our guest today.
Thank you. I appreciate the invite, James.
Hey, and we need to do a shout out to our mutual friend and one of the best life coaches that I know of, our friend David Wright. So thank you, David.
Yes, sir. Thanks, David.
Well, Craig, our audience heard a little bit at the beginning of the show of my introduction to you, but they want to hear from you. They want to hear more from you, or who you are and what you know. So if you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit about yourself to our audience.
Be happy to. I was one of those fortunate kids that grew up in a great family in a great town, Oklahoma, up in the state of Oklahoma. And I had a great mom and dad, grandparents, took me to church, vacation Bible school. So when I look back at my age now, the foundation, it was fortunate and I was very blessed. Since then, when it came time for me to start my own family, I got married. We had two children. I was teaching a Sunday school class where we were going to church. Unfortunately, I met with an unwanted divorce. And then after picking up some of the pieces and time and a little bit of pain and then a lot of pain, I remarried a beautiful girl who also had children. And so we then blended our families together. And that's why the name of the nonprofit, Blended Together Forever.
And when did you guys start Blended Together Forever?
We started it in 2011. It was about 11 years ago. We knew that the Lord had called us. And I'll tell you that story just real quick, James. Where we were going to church at the time, our pastor approached me and said, "Hey, Craig, Mother's Day is coming up. And I've been reading some statistics of marriages and families, and I'm finding out about 40% of the kids today are raised in a blended family. And so I think I'd like you and Gina just to share your testimonial that Sunday morning." So we did. And that's really when the Lord started knocking on our hearts, because we knew it was a need, and we didn't find, literally, James, any church that was addressing this growing population. I thought, man, we got to do something. So that's why we started it. It was just out of a need, and we figured we need to do something.
But now you just said a statistic of 40%. Is that higher now? What is the trend? Because before we got together, I looked up some of the stats on it, and numbers were all over the place. So what numbers are you saying that they are now?
Well, numbers are all over the place. Depends upon which poll and which, I give you the divorce statistics, since that's where kind of blending usually happens. People will say 50% of people that get married get divorced, whether they're in a church setting or just secular setting. Probably is a little high. I see some from Pew that say as little as 33%. So probably safe to say anywhere from 33 to 50. I know that from the number of kids, depending upon how you define blended, James, you've got adopted children in a mix. You've got single moms that are raising kids. You've got, in my case, somebody that was divorced and remarried. In another person's case, somebody that was widowed and married and may have brought adult children in. So the statistics could go everywhere, but I will tell you this, big picture, a typical blended family is not an easy dance, because you've got different parents, different styles, different amounts of children. Some are younger, some are older. So trying to blend a family into a harmonious unit is an incredibly neat calling, but it's hard. It's not easy. And that's, of course, why we're talking today.
So I'm going to jump down a rabbit trail that you just said, because I'm from a family that I'm adopted into, but I was adopted as a baby. Would that be considered blended because of,
Sure.
I'm the oldest. I was the first one, I was adopted, and I was, 2 months old, so I have no memory of that. So that my family would still be considered blended.
That is correct. I'll give you an example. This may have not happened to you, but I have a friend of mine who adopted their kids, and he told me a story. He said, "Craig, I didn't realize I was blended, but now I understand it, because there was probably a family gathering, picnic, church social, something, and a lady went up to his son and said, 'Oh, you've got your daddy's nose.' And he goes, he knew it wasn't his biological dad. So that creates a simple question in a little boy's mind. He goes, 'It wasn't my nose. It wasn't like my daddy.' And those are just little things. But that's an example of an adopted situation where you say, you just like facial feature of a parent.
But from my own perspective, our oldest two children that we have are also adopted. We have 3 children. Our oldest 2 are adopted, and I've never thought of us in that context of blended. Now, we've heard that question time and time again. "Oh, your kids' baby pictures look just like yours," and I would always joke, when my wife afterwards, I said, "Well, my genes are out there at a lot of places, honey. You just never know what's going on." That didn't win me any favors at home, and folks, that is not what happened.
Right.
We'll make sure we clear that out there. But in my children, the oldest 2, the oldest one was adopted 1 day old. We brought her home. She was born on Saturday. She was with us on Sunday, and my son it's a different situation altogether. He came home with us 11 hours after he was born. He never, I mean, he was, never spent any time. So for them, and for us, except for the 9 months of labor beforehand, we experienced everything from day one with them. So I've never really thought about it
You bet.
in that context.
You bet. And again, the earlier you blend, the better. It'd be like somebody that got a little girl from China that brought over to the U.S. from day one. That's all they know, and that's great. But there'll come a day that little girl will grow up and go, well, tell me about my real mom. And is she alive? Could I ever go to China and see her? So those are questions that wouldn't happen if you and I just married and had biological children. So that's all I'm trying to describe right there. There's a few little extra issues that would be addressed someday.
This definition you're giving me helps explain one of the stats that I was confused by, because one of the stats says that up to 65% of all families are blended in some way. And I was thinking, is there that many that's divorced or widowed that came together? But now when you add that aspect in, it would include us. And I wouldn't have even thought about us in that context.
Right.
So what are some of the challenges then that children that are raised in this kind of family, what are kind of some of the challenges that they would encounter that maybe other families don't even have to concern themselves with?
Let me answer that, but first, before I do, confess a sin, because I think whoever's listening to this, whether they're kids or they're adult workers that work with the youth or whatever, something that I didn't understand 20 some odd years ago that I definitely do today, and I wish I could go back and fix it. I really can't. But here was the mistake I made. I did not try to travel the tracks of the kids that I was inheriting. Technically, you could call them my stepchildren. I didn't use that term. Some people call them bonus children, but it doesn't matter. The point is, when I inherited other kids, I was trying to deal with my own issues and my own biological kids, and I really didn't try to understand what they were feeling. But once I did, now I'll give you the answer. There's so many things that come up. I'll give you two. The first one that comes to my mind is loyalty. And the second thing is just parenting styles. Those are two very, very big issues. So I'll tell you a little bit of depth on both of those. Loyalty. Let's just say a family has, again, a widow and remarries, and her new husband has children and she has children, and they're going to blend their families together. It's all positive. We're sad that the former mate passed, but we're all going to try to blend together. All of a sudden, let's just take this boy as an example that wants to get close to this new father figure, this new parent role, almost self-sabotages himself, because he thinks, if I get close with my new, quote, stepdad, I'm almost being disloyal to my real dad.
Wow.
And if he passed away, I don't want to do that. So loyalty is a big dynamic in a blended family, because everybody's asking, are you going to be loyal to me? Let me give you the other typical blended example. Let's say that same family, but only this time they go through a divorce. And all of a sudden, here's a new stepdad in the picture. My real biological dad is across town, and I see him every first, third, and fifth weekend. But other than that, I've got to have a new father figure to kind of report to. I'm 8 years old, and it could go good or it could go hard. But all of a sudden, let's say they got a good rapport and they got a good relationship. Same thing. I can't act like I like my stepdad because my real dad won't like that. So he's in this tug of war of loyalty. And there's always that dynamic underneath the water. I was talking to my own daughter recently, and she said, growing up, she goes, well, is this week at mom's house or is this week at dad's house? And And then, well, you got to do Christmas with us, or you're going to do Thanksgiving with them. And it's just always just loyalty. That's one thing. The second is the parenting style. Unfortunately, you can't do anything about the other parent's home. Now, I'm assuming, James, that they've got some good standards. So I'm not talking about if it's unhealthy. Well, you got different people that do different things. Over here at mom's house, we could eat whatever we want, but when we come over here, we got to eat our vegetables. Yeah. Well, over there, we could stay up till 10:30 at night. Over here, we got to go to bed at 9. Yeah. So those are battles also. So those are just a couple that I think kids face naturally growing up, that loyalty. And then there's different parents, different styles, different things that they toe the line on.
So how can we as our job here at Generation Ziegler is really to equip people to want to impact positively future generations. How can we help them as those who work with youth navigate through this? How can we help? Now, I'm talking about folks who are not in the parent situation first. We'll talk about the parenting a little bit later, but I'm talking about, like, I'm a teacher, I'm a youth worker, I'm a youth coach. What can I do to help them navigate through this?
The first thing you're addressing it just by doing an interview right here, acknowledging there is a need. You would be surprised how many people continue to, in my opinion, keep their head in the sand and don't address it. So they're not equipped. They play like it doesn't exist. They typically do, whether marriage, family, parenting, the same way that you would with a biological nuclear family. And that's just not true. If you do it that way, you're not giving them the tools they need. So the first is addressing it like you're doing. And the second is, I know my wife and I, we wrote a book and created some resources to teach and empower for the people that are trying to mentor the youth or adults or a Sunday school class at your church or whatever. But I think putting resources in their hand and realizing the need, and again, just trying to feel what they're feeling and what do they deal with what they're dealing with. Those are the two things that come to mind. And y'all are doing it.
You think it's something that folks who actually are working with youth on a day-to-day basis need to be aware of, or should they, how much should a youth worker who's helping youth, or a youth minister who's helping youth, how much should they know or be involved with this?
They need to know, and I'll bet you they don't know. I bet they're blindly leading in this, at least in this area. I'll tell you one statistic that just shocked me. When my wife, back in the day, we could go eat lunch with our kids at school, and we could actually sit at the table and talk and share and eat a meal and then hug them and go home. I know that may be different today, but she said, Craig, when I ate lunch with our kids at the table, every kid at that table was in some type of a blended family. And that's where she saw the need, was the kids eating lunch at school. But I'll bet you that school teacher, or in your case, that youth worker, especially if they're not blended, they wouldn't probably understand, and good for them, but there's extra things that they need to be aware of, just like you would in, a different other situation, other children's specific needs. And this is kind of across the board.
Are there specific issues that you think that a child or a youth that comes to a blended family encounters that maybe someone from a nuclear family, or I hate to say normal, but you understand where I'm going on that, what they may encounter that someone who's working with them needs to be on the lookout for? So I'm leading a youth group, I need to be aware of this kind of things, or maybe even psychologically what's going on, their self-image, those kind of issues.
Yep, I do. Our mutual friend, Bob Teedy, I think his line comes to my heart right now. Tell me more. Have that youth worker go to that child and say, hey, tell me about your dad, and just listen. Tell me about your stepdad, and just listen. Tell me about your half sister. That if we just ask good leading questions and listen, those kids will tell, and you'll know at that point so much more by just asking good questions like, tell me more about your family, tell me about your home. That would be big.
Okay, so let's talk now to the parents. How does a parent approach this? What are some advice and tips that you could give them to help them as they navigate through this? Because I've seen it. I've seen blended families. I guess that are coming from divorce settings that work extremely well, and I've seen some that you could tell that this is a disaster. It's dysfunctional over here. So help us out here. Give us some help here so that the folks who are listening here at least can have some direction, some steps that they can go on.
Okay, here's the first step. Don't compare. Let me explain. There are certain blended families, James, that just are never going to fully blend. There's others that are going to blend quickly, and there's others that's going to take some real hard work in between point A and point Z. And if you're not careful, you tend to look to the left or look to the right or see what's working for that blended family or what's working for that one and think, well, what's wrong with us? Or why are we, they're all different, and it took me a while to get there, but every family ends up in a different spot. There are just some that you're not going to be able to fully blend. And I don't want to go through all these different types of examples, but I'll give you just one. I'm thinking of a friend who his wife passed away. He had adult children, who's married, 30 years old plus, and said, well, Dad, you can get a new wife, but we can't get a new mom. And she just kind of made a decision that I'm not going to accept this lady. I'm going to be cordial. I'll see her at Thanksgiving, but that's about it. And if that's as good as it can ever get in that situation, be at peace with that. It's okay. Okay. They're adults. But then there's another situation. I'll take my own family. I'm convinced, well, there's two different kids. One bonded with me quickly because he was young, like you. When you get him early, that's usually they don't have any other either baggage in the past or a lot of history with another parent. So when you get them young, that's usually easier. And then there was this younger 2-year-old that he bonded really quick with me. Now, one that was more middle school, he kind of convinced himself, dug his heels in and said, you're not my dad. I don't have to do anything you say. And that's kind of how we started. It wasn't anything I did or didn't do. It's just that's how he felt. So I think you can't compare because we're all on a journey to blend together, and that destination is different. So that's the first thing is, number one, don't compare. The second thing that I would give as advice would be slow down. We tend to want things to go together quicker, kind of like microwave it. It's a long process. There was a lady that I first learned years ago, Patricia Papelbon, that says the average time it takes for a blended family to integrate is 7 years.
Wow.
That's a long time. Now, since then, I have a theory on this. This is just a theory, because back then it was like the blind leading the blind, James. I think today with more awareness, we got a book out to help blend. I think you can, it's still going to be hard, but I think you could at least shorten the time frame. Again, this is totally a theory. Maybe I'm wrong, but it just takes time. And so you just still have high goals, but lower your time expectations.
Yeah. I've seen that with two families that I'm thinking of. One that I don't think they've ever really fully integrated. I think that the children still consider themselves I'm part of this family over here. I'm part of this family over here. And this
Right.
third entity is just our housing arrangement.
Yep.
And then I know another friend, a very good friend I've known for over 30 years. He met a lady after his divorce. He had 3 children. She was divorced and had 3 children. They got married, became he says, we're the modern Brady Bunch.
Yeah.
And somewhere during the process, her children of their own accord, 2 sons and 1 daughter of hers, came to him and his wife and said, we don't want to be a separate name. We want to be your name. We are this family. That's who we want to be. Can you make that happen? And they, of course, had to work out all kinds of logistics with their birth father and stuff. But
Right.
it eventually happened, and and they're all, they don't consider themselves to be anything different. And not to say that there wasn't, differences on the way they were, had to be approached, but I saw that so much differently going forward on that.
Yeah.
What a difficult road some folks will have to manage on this.
It is, but God gives us grace.
Mhm.
And I think if we have the big picture in mind, this, heaven awaits for all of us. All the rewards, they may not come on this side of heaven, but God redeems, God restores, He sees, and it's all going to be okay.
So we've talked to the folks who are working with them and their parents. We still have some youth who are staying with us, and they're still listening for this, or maybe their parents want them to listen to it in this fast. What advice can we give to a child who is in this situation to help them as they navigate going forward? Because I think that's sometimes overlooked. We deal with the parents, we deal with the parenting styles, we'll deal with it from the top down, but do we really empower the youth as they're going through it with the tools that they need so that they can manage it better? So what kind of advice can we give them?
I'd make 3 lists. I'd have them on the first list, tell me something you love about, and then fill in the blank. Your dad, your stepdad, your mom, your stepmom, your stepbrother, your stepsister, your half brother, your adopted, whoever. Start with listen and have them focus on something that they love and appreciate about that. Then the second column was just typical. What do you not like about your sibling, step sibling, whatever? And then the third column, what would you like to change? If you could change them, and you can't, but what would you like to see change? I'm going to give you the answer in my family, because I think this really hit me. Favoritism. It was so easy for me to be naturally in alignment with my own biological children, because just we had history together, we were blood. So when it came time to discipline our children, it would be natural for me to be a little bit lighter on my own kids than maybe my step kids. And so I was playing favoritism. I wasn't doing it intentionally. It's just that I knew they'd been dragged through a divorce. So I didn't want them to go through more issues, but it's so hard to be really loyal to everybody equally, but I would really watch out for that. And I think that's natural that you can talk to the kids. Do you feel like you're a part, or you feel like, you're not? Because everybody wants to be a part of a family. Everybody wants to be, included. And if it's not addressed when people grow up, it's like, well, those kids are over there and these kids are over here, and you're really not one heartbeat or one unit. And that's hard. I get it, but that's a goal worth pursuing, that we support each other, even if we don't like each other all the time. We go to each other's sporting events or school recitals or whatever, but try to be one, and don't play favorites.
I love those lists that you have. There's something that you like, something that you do not like, and then what would you like to change? That That's going to involve some deep reflection from them, but also as adults too. It's going to involve some deep reflection from us, to be able to swallow and acknowledge what they write down.
I agree.
Mm. Mm. So how can our audience connect with you to learn more about this? So I hope our audience has seen the value of this. And we'll put some links up, but tell us how we can do that, how we can connect with you. That'd
be great. Let me give you the website and then the social media channels for starters. The website is blendedtogether.org. My wife and I do speaking engagements here in the DFW area. It doesn't have to be a church Christian type audience. We're very comfortable, secular audience. It doesn't really matter. So speaking engagements are one thing. Also, number two, on our social media channels, just, Instagram, Facebook, all that. It's blended together forever on our social media channels. And I'll tell you the story as we close, why that's there. And I think it will not only sink hopefully into the hearts of your audience, whether they're youth workers or even kids or parents or whatever. My wife came up with the name because as we knew we were supposed to start this ministry, we struggled and said, well, we're blending. We want to be together. And one day she just said, I know, blended together forever. And I looked at her and go, that seems long. Why only have a short? She goes, no, blended together forever. And she said, whatever got you here, you pick up the stake, you put it in the ground, and you make this marriage last forever. I thought, ooh, I like that because, God makes beautiful things out of broken pieces. He's done that with all of us. And so we pick up the pieces, whether there's a divorce, whether there's a death, whether there's whatever causes this to be blending, and we put a stake in the ground and we make this family blended together forever. So that's where they can find us on our social media channels.
That's awesome, Craig. I appreciate that. And thank you again for being our guest.
You're welcome.
On this. I do think this is an issue and a topic that we tiptoe around sometimes. Wouldn't you agree to that? Sometimes we just don't want to attack it. And I want us to be able to equip people who are working with youth with everything they need to help them thrive.
We want to continue to reach the kids. We have a big heart for the next generation. We know we feel what they've gone through. We really, really, really want to help. We want to help the parents and we want to help the pastors and churches and all that too, but we really, really, really want to reach the kids. So anything we can do in the future, James, I'm excited to start a new friendship with you guys and believe in what you're doing. I'm watching and reading about Gen Z and the impact you're making. So keep up the great work you guys are doing.
Thank you. Thank you again for everything you do. Thank you to David for connecting us. He seems to be very good at finding people who will have a lot of synergy and very much can work together on that. And thank you, audience, for sticking with us. And listen, as always, someone that needs to hear this message, needs to hear this episode. So like, comment, and share on it so that it can reach more people. And we'll see you again next week on the Gen Z Show.